Good morning, Vikings fans. This is Morning Joe's, brought to you by Grey Duck Vodka and Ticket Club. I am your host.
That's what I need this morning.
Tell me about it. We made a huge mistake doing a morning show. I am your host, Joe Johnson, owner of PurplePTSD.com and VikingsTerritory.com. I also co-host the Purple Journal podcast with Luke Braun and the other Joe on Morning Joe's, Mr. Joe Oberly, who is the editor for Purple PTSD and Vikings Territory, and he also writes for the Sports Post. How you doing, man?
I'm good. I don't know if I'm coming down with a cold or something, so if I'm hacking and wheezing throughout the broadcast, just I don't know what to do. No, I'm all right. It's that time of year, though, you know?
Yeah, it's going around, and
Yep.
As I get older, I get more and more aggravated by people who are clearly sick and do things like with zero regard of getting other people sick.
My mom doesn't go to church anymore. She watches it on TV because of the handshake of peace. So.
Yeah.
I can't blame her.
Totally. At the liquor store last night, this guy was hacking and wheezing, and then he literally licked his thumb to thumb through his money like 20 times. And I was just staring at him like my jaw dropped, and I just doused myself with hand sanitizer.
Well, I learned my lesson at the airport a few weeks back when I'm coming back during the Saints game. I'm trying to find my boarding pass, and I'm putting I finally find it, put it in my mouth, and then put all my stuff back in my bag. And I walk up there, and she won't take it. She says, "I'm not touching that. You had that in your mouth."
Wow.
Okay, so I had to sit there and try to scan it in myself on that little thing, and I was, of course, panicked because there's a huge line behind me.
And it's embarrassing too.
It was. It was a little fumbling, and I was not too happy about it. But hey, live and learn. Like I guess I can see it when you're working in the public and they're freely handing you their
especially with maybe they're worried about when you go to the doctor, they always say, have you been out of the country in the last couple of weeks? Yeah. So maybe they're afraid of Ebola. We should get that started. Our listeners, we're going to start a hashtag, keep it out of your mouth. That doesn't sound right. So on the Purple Journal podcast, you were the only one that, if I recall correctly, chose the Vikings to win on Sunday night. Both Luke and I were on the other side, and I predicted the Saints to beat the Vikings as well. I was the only one that did that, and I felt really crappy about it, and I don't feel good about this either as a fan. I do kind of feel like in doing some more prep for this show that the chances are it's going to be almost a coin flip. I feel like these teams mirror one another really well. They're in obviously different stages, but they have a lot of things in common. And so when you have that, you have a divisional opponent that you're familiar with. Granted, it's a new coach in Chicago and a relatively new quarterback. Anything can happen. And so I just want to start out the show by saying I'm not as doom and gloomy as I was Wednesday night. I'm feeling a little more confident. And just to start, I wanted to get your general feeling as to this game, and then to follow that up, maybe your thoughts on whether or not this is a must-win game. Because I have some thoughts on that as well.
Well, it's good to hear the Dow Jones Industrial of Viking fandom is back up again. Glad to hear that. I am usually, I'll be honest, full disclosure, I tend to pick the Vikings a lot, often. In the last...
I don't remember a time you haven't.
I didn't pick them. I picked the Rams.
Okay.
This season. And I don't pick against them often. Like I said, I thought they'd win, but I also picked Philly, and I thought they would lose that first one and win the second one, and I was right on that. But, I used to – my brother, goes in, looks at our website, and It says, do you ever pick against the Vikings? And I often don't. They usually have a good team, and over the last 10 years, they generally have a decent team and have a chance to win. And anybody.
And you've
can
been
win.
right way more than you've been wrong.
I think so. Yeah. So, but anyway, and I picked them and for this one, and I think you're right. I think it is a very even game. It's going to be because the Bears have been playing very well. Their defense is a beast. Their offense is coming around. Trubisky is figuring things out. But even since I did that Wednesday, I'm starting to feel even better. That like I told you last night when I sent you our fast furious facts for Friday that
yes.
There's plenty to weep about there, but there's a little hope at the end, so we'll get to that. But they got not a rookie quarterback, but he's pretty young, and they're catching the Vikings at
new system.
They're catching the Vikings at a good time for the Vikings. It always depends who you're playing when
you're playing them. Yeah,
you hear that cliche, and to a certain degree, it's true. And the Vikings are coming off a very solid performance against the Lions, just like the Lions did, or just like the Bears are. But the Bears didn't have to face Darius Slay, and they had had plenty of ease back in the Detroit secondary, throwing the ball around. So, and the Vikings, scored. I think they scored 34 points against them. No, that was the Bears. But anyway, the Vikings played them well as well. So, the defense, Trubisky hasn't seen the defense like this yet. So, we'll see how he handles that. And I was just before I jumped on, I was listening to K-Fan and Paul Allen and Paul Churchin were talking, and Churchin says, Allen asked him if who has more pressure on him, and he surprisingly said that the Bears do, because he had talked to some guy down in Chicago, a counterpart of his, and he said that the Bears really have to prove that they're for real. This would be their statement game. So there is a little bit there to do that. So.
There is that. They I think the only national game they've had was the one where Aaron Rodgers came back at the end. There was a quote.
First game of the season, beat the Packers 24-23.
There was a quote from Nagy that said, this is a big game. They were asking about, nerves for a young team going on the national stage like this. And he basically said that he told the team that it's very important. It's a huge statement game. But he said he didn't want them to... I wrote down the quote. I think it was... he didn't want them... Don't overdo it, and don't get stressed or play tight.
But remember, it's a really important game.
Exactly. So that's an interesting caveat, I thought. And when it comes to Trubisky, and we were going to get into this a little bit, but since you brought it up, I found a stat doing prep for the show, and it was a list of the top 10 worst quarterbacks against the blitz since 2015, and I believe Trubisky was fourth on that list in regards to his PFF rating. And
really?
So, yeah.
He's only had a season and a half to compile those numbers.
Yeah.
That's what that means. But
I mean, that means that, it's still true, and he's still he's still learning. And I think that, the Vikings haven't been doing as many blitzes because the AA gap scheme has been quote unquote exposed, or teams have figured that out. But it sounds like they're doing more defensive back blitzes than linebacker blitzes, which was kind of the bread and butter, if I'm correct on that. So that's going to... Yes, and that's a huge thing. We should actually, before we get into the 5 Furious Facts, but quickly, just to finish, I wanted to talk about the must-win aspect of it. If the Vikings do lose, they'd be, I believe, 3 games back. And they wouldn't have the tiebreaker. Is that right?
Let's see. They're 5.
The article I saw.
They're 5-6-1. The Bears are 6-3. They would go to 7-3. The Vikings would be 5-4-1. So they would be 2.5 games back.
2.5 games back. Yeah. So the article I read said the Vikings would need to go 5-1.
Right.
And the Bears' remaining schedule is Detroit, at the Giants, home against the Rams, big game, home against the Packers, I don't remember I think it's at San Fran. Yeah, it is. It's at San Francisco, and then at Minnesota. And so that schedule is a lot easier than the Vikings schedule. And so I feel that this is very much, things they can still. I mean, last season they, started 2-2 and basically won the rest of their games, lost one game. They can do that, but it would be very advantageous to win this game.
Yeah, I'd agree with you. You know me in the must-win games. I think it's real cliche, but there's only 16 games in a season, so you gotta. They're all, usually anybody can beat anybody, and they're all important. They all matter. And as far as the Vikings are concerned, I think it is kind of. I think they do have to win this game because they're behind the 8 ball a little bit if they want to win the division. Yeah, you just pointed out the schedule, and the Bears have certainly been a benefit of that. But it's going to be one of those seasons for the Vikings, I think, since they lost to the Rams and they lost to the Saints, is get in the playoffs and then see what you can do.
Yeah.
You can't worry about home field advantage. You might be able to, if you can win a division, you'll get a home game. But so I think they've got to, win to get in. So keep on winning, and I think they can. My fifth fact, we'll talk about the schedule a little bit more, but I think it's pretty important for the Vikings. There's a bit of pressure on them. But they are trending upward. If they go in there nervous, like they're the underdog, they should go in there with some swagger, like they're defending champs of the NFC North, and they're going against a second-year quarterback. They've had a bye week to get ready for it, and they should go in there feeling strong. And they're pretty healthy. They're starting to get their players back. If I think it's. I don't want to say it's a failing if they lose. I mean, it's very easily they could lose, but they need to win this one. Like they need to win the rest of them, to really position themselves.
And the good news is that Cousins is 2-0 at Soldier Field in his career, playing with the Redskins. And a couple things before we get into the nitty-gritty that I wanted to talk about was just his connection to Chicago. There was a great article in the Pioneer Press about that, and the fact that he grew up in the suburb of Chicago, then he moved to Michigan, and at first he thought he was going to have to turn in all his Bears gear for Lions gear, but he stuck with the Bears, and basically until he became a Redskin, that was his squad. And so I think he's going to have a lot of family there. I think that it's going to be especially special for him, even though he's played there twice and won twice. I think that's a positive.
Yeah, past performance doesn't mean a whole heck of a lot, especially when you're a different team. But you're right. It's funny, the past 2 weeks before the games, first Chris Thomason, who wrote the article for the St. Paul paper, asked him about his connections to the Lions, and he told us the story. Oh, I was born in Chicago, I grew up a Bears fan, blah, 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 blah. So he kind of poo-pooed that. So then Chris came back this week and started asking. We knew exactly the story he was going to write, which he did, and it is a good story. But, I think Cousins was somewhat chagrined. He kind of went, yeah. I think he was kind of trying to downplay. He was answering the questions, professionally like he always does. And there is something there. But, I really think professionals probably at this level don't think about that so much anymore. I've always wondered about people that grow up Packer fans and come and play for the Vikings. I don't know if there's any on the team right now, but one is Tom Compton. I'm not sure. No, he grew up in Minnesota. Anyway, you wonder about how much. I think that's more of the fans' perception than it is.
And I more meant maybe like having family there would be nice, more so than usual.
I didn't think of that, and I guess his family is from Chicago. They moved, to Michigan.
Apparently, his dad is a pastor and used to do services with the Bears players.
Right. So there is a pretty strong connection to that team as a result.
That's crazy.
They didn't move too far across the Michigan lines, that they still remained, Bears fans. So I suspect there will be a lot of family there, and that'll make him want to.
And you know what that means? That means he hates The Packers.
Yes, he does. Yes, he
So
does.
that's a huge positive. I never put that together in my argument for accepting him.
I don't think there's a lot of hate in that man. He's
Yeah.
a pretty nice guy, but yes, he probably grew up disliking them very strongly.
Haven't you noticed he's got like the Cape Fear style knuckle tattoos, and it says F Pack on each hand? He does pull-ups. One quick story that it's frivolous and kind of clickbaity. Speaking of sponsoring or driving attention through clickbait, this isn't really clickbait, but I wanted to mention really quickly that we're having a very special guest on this show on Tuesday, the next Tuesday at 9:30 when the show starts. I mentioned that this episode is brought to you by Grey Duck Vodka, which is a play on Duck Duck Grey Duck, which is a Minnesota thing solely based on the idea came from the touchdown celebration from Kyle Rudolph last season, and Grey Duck Vodka is actually owned by Chad Greenway, and because of my connections at McDonald's Liquor, I put a display up and took a picture and then tweeted it, and Greenway liked the tweet, and then we DM'd each other because he had done some charity promotion with Vikings territory before I purchased it, so I was able to direct message him, and I offered to do some stuff on the website for him, pro bono style, and he actually just asked if he could come on the show, which was amazing, because usually I have to bother people a lot to get them to come on the show. So
That's what guy he is. Yeah.
Everybody that I've brought that up to, strangely enough, have said they've met him, like 20 people, and they've all said he's like the greatest guy. And I know you obviously have interacted with him a lot.
Yeah, I have. I used to, I hope I get a chance to bring it up, but I don't even know if he remembers me, but, I would, I have a bet each year with my cousin, over and under on the Vikings game. One takes the over, one takes the under. We set a number and for wins. And as we heard earlier, I was saying I generally pick the Vikings, so I'm always picking the over. He's picking the under. But I started, figured I had access. I say, Chad, what do you think the Vikings are going to do this year? Just for a record. And I explained to him why I was asking, and he gave me a number. And then as I was walking, he says, "Yeah, if you win, I want some of that beer." So I said, "Oh, you got it," and I did, and I delivered him some beer. Found out what he liked, and blah blah blah. And
When was this?
Oh my gosh, it was probably around. I would say we started doing it. I used to work for CBSSports.com covering the Vikings, CBS Sports Line, and I'd say probably about 2011, 2012.
Okay.
I'd go to him every year and start asking him. And I had delivered him some beer more than once, and then I delivered him when we bought. I'm part of ownership of the Mankato Brewery. I delivered him Mankato beer. So I never did hear what he thought of that, but
I'm sure he remembers.
Yeah, but there's one time that in 2014, I was looking out last night because this astounded me. The Vikings were coming off. In 2014, they were 7-9. In 2015, I asked him down in Mankato. I asked him for his thoughts on the record. He was in that crowd signing autographs, and he looks at me and he goes 11-5, and I kind of scoffed, thinking, "Boy, they're not going to win that." He goes, "Oh, you don't think so?" I said, "Well, I don't know." And he goes, "Yeah, write it down." And they were 11-5 that year. It amazed me, And
Wow.
I went with it. I won the bet, obviously, and
I think it's really cool that he, like, as a player, that's why I asked you what year it was. I wasn't sure if it was recently, that he would partake and not get offended by that. You know what I mean? And
right.
Say, like, what is that supposed to mean? And it seems like, Luke told a story about some of one of the big Vikings writers writing a lot of negative stuff about Greenway being a liability, and it seems like he was aware of it, but he's been super nice to that guy in person. It's just he's the perfect type of guy. He understands. I think that writers have a job to do, and they have to cover things as objectively as possible. My entire track record of writing notwithstanding, and so He just seems like a really great guy, and I could not be more excited about that.
That's true. He is that. He gets it, and there's not to say that he doesn't take offense to some of the things that writers have written or not. I'm sure that's how that other thing Luke referred to sprung out of. I mean, I'm sure Chad approached him and talked to him about it.
He said something to him on Twitter, I think.
Yeah. So and that's fine. I think a player should be able to do that. If you're going to have free reign to go after them and criticize them, if you go personally, you're over the line. But if you're criticizing their play on the field, they have a reason to respond and disagree with you. And just like to me, and it kind of took me for a second. I didn't even know what to say because going from 7-9 to 11-5 is a little bit of a jump, but that's what Zimmer did with this squad. So it's like he knew something. He threw it right out there and had looked at the schedule enough to figure it out. And these guys, it's why I love to quote them in my stories because they're in there. They know more about this game than we do. They just simply do. And,
of course.
Yeah.
Especially with the tight-lipped approach this regime has.
Yeah, that's cool.
But yeah, again, Grey Duck Vodka, Grey spelled Gray. Go to greyduckdistillery.com to see where you can pick up a bottle. It's I am hopefully also going to set up a tasting. He's been doing some tastings. He was in North Dakota last week. People on Reddit showed me pictures. And so I'll keep you guys in the loop in regards to maybe doing an event at McDonald's Liquor, which is over by Lake Nokomis, which is my neck of the woods. But back to what I initially was going to bring up. Adrian Peterson seems to love to talk about the Vikings in the press, speaking of players being honest in the press, and I believe he said that he wants to face the Vikings in the playoffs. He also said that he didn't think the Redskins were not necessarily not a playoff team, but that he felt that they had the components to be a championship team, but they weren't there yet, and they have a lot to work on. I think the loss they had last weekend kind of exposed them a little bit. Stefon Diggs responded to that and basically was super cordial about it. Said, that's AP for you, and it would be extremely exciting to face him in the playoffs. I would love to play the Redskins in the playoffs, to be honest. It would be such a story, the narrative with Cousins facing his old team. Yes. We seem to play them fairly often. Yeah. And we've had struggles there, I believe.
Yep. That's where he busted his knee up on that field.
Yeah, that's true. And so just really quickly wanted your thoughts on that, and maybe if since you have this perspective that not many people have, being someone who's interacted with these players a lot in the locker room at training camps, so on and so forth, does that surprise you about AP? Does he seem like a bitter ex-wife at this point? Or is he just having fun? Is he capable of that?
I would respond to him like Carl Gerbschmidt, Mike, and say just wing it. But it sounds to me a heck of a lot like AP was when he became a New Orleans Saint, and the Saints came into town opening game last season. That his first game back, he was all fired up to play the Vikings. He was fired up to go out there on that field and show the fans that they messed up by letting him go. And he had like 6 carries for 4 yards. I can't remember what it was, but it was really little to nothing. And he stood behind Sean Payton and signed his walking papers there by kind of scowling at him, caught on camera, and mad because he wasn't getting his chance. And then you look at Alvin Kamara. You know why he didn't get his chance. But he's turned it around. He's having a nice season out there. I think the offense is perfect for him. That it plays into his style, and it's probably good for Alex Smith to have that kind of a
workhorse.
That you can rely on. But I wouldn't like to go there. I'd be a little more nervous about it. But if they came here, I think the spot would get probably big for Adrian, and I don't think the Vikings would have. I think they would be able to beat him. But that's AP. He's a very proud athlete. I mean, he sat out there in the scrap heap until he got picked up by Washington right before the season. But it doesn't. He's always been such a confident ball player, especially in his own abilities. You've heard him say it for years that it doesn't surprise me that he's now feeling his oats a little bit and saying this. So I don't think it's in a bad way. I'm sure. It's funny. I just said earlier about Cousins who doesn't think about this stuff. Well, clearly some of those athletes do think about these old places. So.
It's he's such an old school type of player in that he requires 25 touches. There's only a handful of teams that run the offense that he can even be a part of. Mm-hmm. And he wasn't a good fit in New Orleans because of that. He doesn't catch passes out of the backfield. He turns the ball over too much. So I think he's a little delusional in some of the stuff he's been saying, like, the Vikings, when the Vikings, especially earlier in the season when they were 31st or 32nd in the league, he was saying, well, I bet they wish they had me. I'm paraphrasing. It wouldn't work because they wouldn't completely overhaul the offense to focus on him, And so, it's delusional in that regard. It's delusional that he is upset that they didn't pay him $18 million. This isn't Priest Holmes era NFL.
Hopefully he's figured that out now, though. He's got to have figured that out because he's sitting there without a job. And after playing with two other failed teams, I think reality, even for Adrian, had to sink in a little bit. And I'm happy for him that he's still producing because I know he works his tail off. And I'm happy because he's a former Viking, but I would hate it to see him spoil the Vikings.
And it's not really his fault that he's that way. I mean, his hometown has a freaking parade for him every year,
Yeah.
So, of course, your ego's going to be big. You're going to have a different look at things, maybe.
Mine has one for me, but I was born in Siberia, so you don't hear
with the yaks.
Yes.
The Yak Festival. Let's get into Friday's 5 Furious Facts, then maybe talk about injuries just a little bit. Let's do the.
All right, I'll fire through these quickly because we're babbling away as usual. But all right, first one is 10 sacks. The first tale of the tape that's ever made it to 5 Furious Facts for Friday. It's earth-shattering, as I know. I mean, it's unprecedented. But anyway. But it is that big a deal to say it once again. The Vikings had 10 sacks against the Lions last game out. The defense is playing better. Having Everson Griffin back is helping because there's just like there's a pick your poison on offense when you're throwing to Thielen or Diggs, there's a pick your poison on defense a little bit.
And Sheldon Richardson said he's getting his confidence back this week too, so that's good.
I heard him on the radio again last night. He was on a show that Vikings Country or whatever they do in KFan. So I was kind of surprised me. I mean, he's getting back out there, pretty quickly to where he was, and I applaud him. I hope he's doing well mentally, and he met with all the reporters on Wednesday. We had a big scrum with him, and he was, I think, shorter in his answers, but he seems to be getting back to the old Everson. He's not quite as smiley as he has been, but he's probably been through the ringer, so that might be a good way of putting it, Joe, that he's getting his confidence back. But that's a record, and it's one they're going to have to, close to match this week. They got to get after Trubisky.
Big time, and it sounds like is it Kyle Long that's injured on their offensive line, so that could be huge. I wonder. And this ties into injuries. I think Anthony Barr was limited in practice yesterday. Yep. If they're going to put a spy on Trubisky, because I worry, I have visions of Aaron Rodgers breaking out of the pocket, rolling out during a blitz in the red zone, and just basically having free reign. With Trubisky's ability to run, which I believe you also put on this list. You almost think they have to put a spy on him, but I am encouraged by the fact that Long is hurt and hope the front four can get enough pressure so they don't have to blitz as often, even though I do believe that'll be a big part of the game plan, considering what I said earlier about Trubisky under pressure.
Yeah, he runs for an average of 35.6 yards per game, which is quite substantial, and he's got more rushing yardage I think than Tariq Cohen. I think. Well, maybe that's not true.
Yeah, that sounds. I mean, maybe more yards per attempt or something. I know that
the Vikings
they're
need to cut that half. They have to make him. They have to make him beat them with his arm and his eye to his legs, because that's such a you get in your lane and you do what you're supposed to do, and all of a sudden this guy squirts out, and there's always room out there underneath for a guy to pick up 8 to 9 yards, and he's very effective at it. So that will be huge to keep him in the pocket and make him find the guy that's open and hit him.
Yeah, I mean, this is alluding to my 3 ways the Vikings will win, but I agree with you. I think if they can make Trubisky beat them with his arm, make him one-dimensional, that'll be really helpful. I think that in regards to, from what I've heard in Chicago media, they were looking to trade Jordan Howard. They weren't happy with him. A lot of the articles that I read prepping for the show were saying that, speaking of the teams mirroring one another, that they've had struggles in the run game just like the Vikings have. And so that is something that encouraged me a little bit more, that maybe the Vikings defense, playing at the level that they are, can make that happen. But,
they use Cohen a little bit differently, more of a scat back out of the backfield to catch passes.
Yeah.
Running opportunities. But
Jarek McKinnon.
Yeah, exactly. My next furious fact is 16 interceptions. The Bears lead the league with that number, and they're second in overall in turnovers. Vikings win the turnover battle. Their chances are greatly increased to win this game. I mean, we've heard that stat about them all season and all Zimmer's regime. They have to. So they cannot be out there coughing up the ball to this opportunistic defense. So.
I'll add my own furious fact to this. 4 of Harrison Smith's 20 career interceptions have come against the Bears. And and so like you said, that doesn't really mean anything, especially considering it's a different system, different quarterback. But I'm completely on board. That's the reason I called for a Bears win, because I feel like obviously this team has turned the ball over more often, and considering how good they are at getting turnovers and scoring points off those turnovers, I think they're number 1 in points scored as well off of turnovers. It's scary.
Well, I still consider turnovers a little bit / a lot of bit of luck. Some of it you can put yourself in the right position. You can tackle and try to grab at the ball. You can, but you still have to have, once that ball's out, to have things go your way in order to get it. So I think it's a true stat to this point. That's what they've done. That doesn't guarantee they're going to continue with that, but we'll see. The Vikings have to be wary of it, and Cousins certainly is.
He brought it up again this week.
Well, he was asked about it, but
and he said, I can't drop back and just think don't fumble, or don't turn the ball over. I just have to play. But
he does.
With Khalil Mack coming in and having 4 forced fumbles and 7.5 sacks, if I recall correctly, that's scary. And I saw a quote that I thought was interesting from DiFilippo, who said, we don't want to completely overhaul what we're doing for one guy. We've had to deal with these elite pass rushers a lot this season, and we've done a fairly good job. And I was thinking, have they?
I think so.
Well, it's getting better, I think, but those stats of Cousins being under duress, 50% of the time, nearly, doesn't really, to me, speak very loudly. That I think Cousins is doing things that maybe we didn't expect him to. I know we talked a lot about Case Keenum being damn near magical in avoiding pressure. So I think Cousins has compensated for that, and so it doesn't seem as bad as it otherwise might. But it is daunting.
It is. They've got to keep an eye on that lad. Speaking of the Bears' defense, they're ranked fourth in defensive yards allowed per game. Vikings are fifth for what it's worth, and fourth in points allowed per game at 19.4. So they are a solid unit that was good last year, and now they're even better this year. So that's a huge deal. On the other side of the ball, the fifth fact is the Chicago offense is fifth in scoring.
That really surprised me.
Well, and here's the reason why, I think. But, Trubisky's starting to figure it out. They've got some talent on offense in both the backfield and at receiver. I mean, you had Allen Robinson having his best game as a Bear last week. And I think Anthony Miller had his best game as a Bear. I think he's a rookie, I believe, catching 122 yards and a touchdown. But the Bears are 6-3, and their 6 wins are against teams 500 or below. Now, maybe Seattle went above 500 last night. I can't remember. Or else let's put them at 500.
You know what's surprising that I read before the show? That the Vikings, all their wins are against teams with losing records as well.
Yes, I know. No, you're just stomping on my touchdown caller. This was your ray of hope. This was your ray of hope. Now listen, 6 wins against teams that are 500 below. Their 3 losses are to the Packers, 4-5-1, the Dolphins at 5-5, and the Patriots, which is the only legit team that they've played. So in all those games, they've beaten teams only with losing records, and they've lost to a couple that have losing records as well. They played the Patriots, and that's the only tough game they played. And they did play them tough. I guess they lost by a touchdown, but. In their 3 losses, they've lost by a total of 11 points, which is pretty dang good. That means their offense and defense are both keeping them in games. So, I think, but the Vikings played the Rams very well.
They should have beat the Saints.
They should have beat the Saints. And what's their other loss?
The Buffalo Bills.
Yeah, well, they should have lost. They should have won that game. But so. I take that with a grain of salt. I think I still think the Vikings they've also beaten Philadelphia and Philly, which was a nice win. They've done well on the road, better than
Cousins is a lot better on the road than he is at home, and I wonder why that is. Maybe it's just coincidental, but
I think it's got to be. But to a certain degree that. Until he gets comfortable in U.S. Bank Stadium, it's a new stadium to him, so it's kind of a road game. But the Vikings played the Packers tough. They should have won that game if one of 2 kicks was in overtime. So, and you can parse every one of these wins or losses any way you want. I think it's more telling that the Bears have had a pretty soft schedule. They've had a 4th-place schedule, and they've been last place in the division for the past 4 years. They've benefited for some high draft picks, done well, and they're going to get better. Their defense is great. I think the Vikings can rattle their offense a little bit, and it's like the point you made earlier. If their offensive line is a little bit hobbled, the Vikings should be able to make some hay there, and that's where it's going to have to start, and that's how the Vikings are going to win that game by keeping them down, because the Vikings will score against the Bears. Not a lot, though. Not a heck of a lot.
So their offensive coordinator said the Vikings are the best third-down defense in the history of the NFL, and I wasn't sure if he was just speaking loosely or if that's the truth. But they are very good. I mean, they allowed 2% last year. Now they're at 25.7. So that's, they should be ashamed of themselves. Yeah, it's really good. And when you have apparently the average third in distance is 3rd and 9. So, if you can eliminate that run game and then force Trubisky to have to pick up those yards, that's really encouraging. Their red zone defense is comparable to that. They've done a lot of bend don't break stuff. I found it very interesting that let me remember his name. Their kicker, Cody Parker, missed 4 kicks, and so 2 news helicopters flew over the practice field and were trying to get video of him practicing kicks. That's like super hardcore. And then the team basically came out and did a cease and desist and said, you can't film practice. This isn't the Patriots. And so I believe the hype is out of control right now in Chicago. That seems like an unprecedented move. Granted, I'm not, cognizant of how things worked, 10, 15 years ago. But I just wanted your thoughts on that as somebody who's got that experience.
When you put that on the agenda, I wasn't aware of that story. I go, what is he talking about helicopters? And I didn't get a chance to get back to you. But that's hilarious. Yeah, Cody had, coming into the game, he had been perfect in all his extra points, and he'd been kicking pretty good. But he struggled in that game, missing all those kicks. That was pretty amazing. That's a little aggressive.
It seems like it.
I'm glad they did what they did. God, you got to know you're a distraction. This guy's trying to work on his game, and unless it's Minnesota helicopters or news agencies that have gone down there to do the filming. But Chicago.
Talk about
what?
Well, just real quickly, I was going to say if he's got the yips, that is not going to help.
No, yeah, that's exactly right. That's exactly right. Yeah, I hate it when I get the yips on the golf course and they start sending helicopters out at me. But
I always tell you that story of me at this huge end of the year golf tournament at Minnetonka. We had a group of 50 people, a bunch of reporters from both papers, and the first hole to the right is the parking lot, and then the street. And I always forget which one's a hook and which one's a slice, but my ball always would end up going pretty far to the right. So my first tee off, I took up like a 2x2 foot piece of sod. Completely just missed the ball because I was super nervous. And then the next three balls all hit cars in the parking lot.
Oh my!
And I was like, just get me out of here. This is awful. Which is probably why I don't play golf anymore.
Are you a left-handed player or right-handed?
Right-handed.
Then you were slicing, and that's generous.
Okay.
Generally. Anyway, so I was going to say we don't need to bring that up because then we'll have to start sending helicopters to watch you play golf.
I get the yips doing these shows, man.
Yeah, exactly. Chicago's a Cubs town, but it's a Bears town. And if the Bears are playing good, they are all over this team. They love this team. I mean, it just, for me, the Bears are just like a part of the fabric there. They are. I mean, when you think of Chicago, the city of big shoulders,
the Bears.
It's a Bears town. So this is good news that they're trying to freak out the kicker. Maybe not trying to, but
that was my point. I thought not to interrupt you and steal your take, but I'm going to. This game very well could come down to field goals or extra points. And speaking of the mirroring of the teams, the Vikings had their struggles and they made a move that, in retrospect, it looks like a huge positive. I think Bailey has gotten better. I think he lost his spot as the second most accurate kicker ever. Now he's third. But he's been spot on. And going into a game like this, with the pressure on that guy, I don't know how old he is. But, man, if he misses, something like that.
Yeah, I don't see him missing a lot of field goals like that again this week. And, the pressure's ratcheted up, certainly. But I look at the way Mason Crosby in Chicago, who did the same thing, missed 4 kicks a few weeks ago. He turned it around the next week. And
he missed one last night, but
he did. But but then again, he's a seasoned veteran. I think Bears kicker is a little bit younger than that.
Yeah,
in the league. But anyway, I don't think you'll see missing a 3 more kicks. But I think if it came down to a long one to win the game, there's going to be a lot of pressure on him. So. I would think that Mike Zimmer would save a timeout just to ice him.
For sure. Have you ever been to Soldier Field?
I've been underneath it in the parking garage. I have walked around it several times. My son lives in Chicago, so I get down there a lot. I've always wanted to go to a game there, and I've been telling him you got to get me tickets to a Bears-Vikings game down there, and it still hasn't happened. But I would have liked to have gone to the old Chicago, and it's new. It's really strange looking now. It's this old Chicago Stadium inside this new spaceship, looking like thing. But I'm glad they kept the name because it's Chicago Field or Soldier Field. So it's one of those old time stadiums with a lot of tradition and weight to it. It's not just named after a sponsor. So
that's really cool.
Yeah, I do want to get in there someday, and hopefully I will. Maybe you'll send me down there and sign.
I should. Next, we have Ticket Club. We have a lot of providers. I'm sure I could get some good tickets from relatively cheap or maybe free if they're listening. I was just wondering because I've heard everyone says. Because I was planning on going to Lambeau this year, and I was asking can you wear Viking stuff? They're like, oh yeah, it's not Chicago. And I assume it's not as bad as Philadelphia where they'll murder you, but I was wondering how aggressive it is.
It is. You're right. My son's been in there many times. He and his buddies go, and they're all Chicagoans, and he wears his Vikings gear. I kind of said to him, you might want to keep that on the down low, but he got some pop spilled on him and different things the last time he did it. He's out there having fun, and the Vikings have been winning those games, so you're even more conspicuous. In your Vikings gear. So yeah, you're right. I mean, they will get after you. He didn't seem to mind it, but boy,
I would like that.
I would be bitter, but
I would probably end up in the stadium jail. Or one of my cousins was in the Metrodome Stadium jail 3 times, and they basically told me he's no longer allowed there. Let's talk about Dalvin Cook a little bit because there was the headline that he is a full go / he's unleashed this week, which to me, I guess, I wanted to, before I say anything, get your take on that. Does that mean they had him on a pitch count, or that the fifth gear he brought up in regards to his run last week, that they're confident now he's fully healthy and that they can utilize him in the ways that they've wanted to for the last year and a half?
Yeah, it's I don't know. I didn't get a chance to go past the headline on that one. I'm glad to hear it. I'm glad I don't know if that's some writer. It
was a quote from DiFilippo.
Oh, it was.
He said, he's a full go, and then they asked Cook about it, and he said, if I'm 100% healthy, I'm still interested to see how my body might react. I'm a little worried that something might flare up, but as of right now, he said he's 100%. And he was super psyched for the game because it's a big game, and he finally feels healthy, basically. And so maybe he's not going to be on a pitch count. Maybe they can actually utilize him the way they wanted to, or they did last year. That's a huge plus, obviously.
I guess I think they will still exercise. They'll have caution in the back of their heads. I mean, hamstrings can be tweaked at any time, and you can go down. I don't want to, they're not going to send him out there unless he's, ready to hit the hole as hard as he can, and I'm sure he will. But the fact to hear him say against Detroit that he was thinking about that 70-yard run, he was thinking about his hamstring, then maybe that's what they're talking about. He feels that he doesn't have to think about that, and he can just go out there and play and not try to protect yourself. But he's also got the knee too. So
he did put a kind of a disclaimer on it, though.
Yeah, but he did, and that's good. And I think the Vikings will, they'll put plenty of Murray out there. If you don't utilize him and just keep, Dalvin, refreshed, his legs, fresh, by spelling him with Murray, you're making a mistake, I think, because Murray is a different style runner. So I don't know. If they had him on a pitch count last game, it wasn't a very small one. You got plenty.
And you're right. I mean, Murray's been playing relatively well. I think his style of running. I don't want to say that. I was going to say his style of running is better suited for a game like this. But the sample size for Dalvin Cook is very small.
Yeah.
So who knows if he just started out great and he could have plateaued or whatever. We still don't know a lot about him. But right. You have Murray playing the best football of his career. I know some people are down on him. A lot of the games haven't been the type of games where you can run the ball, and that's not the way the NFL really works anymore. The Delvin Cook thing it gives me a little bit of confidence that if the line collapses, maybe he can just be the dump off guy, like Chester Taylor used to always run 5 yards and turn around and just stand there. And they'd always dump the ball off and he'd pick up a first down. Have Delvin Cook do that. Have him be an outlet, especially with Khalil Mack coming in. David Morgan might be hurt. DiFilippo talked about Khalil Mack and said that, like I said earlier, he kind of said, well, we don't want to overreact for one guy. We've played well. But apparently Khalil Mack is very good at overcoming chips from tight ends or running backs. He basically is like invulnerable to them, is what DiFilippo said. And so it'll be interesting to see how they scheme around that. I haven't watched a lot of Bears games, so I thought it was interesting that the biggest thing they said with Khalil is identifying where he's going to line up, because he lines up
both sides of the field.
Yeah, and that's the number one thing. And then where he lines up, there's going to be some changes at the line from Cousins.
It sounds like what you were working up to. I mean, and I think you're spot on. That's a great way to use Dalvin Cook. You see Khalil on the left side, and you sprint him out to the opposite side and dump it to him out there. I do believe they're going to get the pass out quick, the ball out quick as possible.
Yeah,
they're not going to give him a chance to kill him. And I saw some stats. He's predominantly lines up on the left side, coming in at right defensive ends right tackles, and so you may see a lot of that, to try to get him on Brian O'Neill. So.
Yeah, that scares me a little bit. Yeah. They've praised him so much. I think Zimmer compared him to Reggie White and said that was the best comparison he could think of in not even recent NFL history, but in NFL history in regards to, I don't know if he meant just how good he is, or if he meant the way that he basically ended up in Chicago.
That's what that was a response to. That question was, can you compare this trade where someone comes over and makes it, one player, makes his defense all the better, and that he was trying. I think he just hates when they ask him questions like that, but. But it's a good comparison, because when the Packers got Reggie White, it turned them into a Super Bowl team.
Yeah. It was. I have no idea why he ended up going there, and I resent him for it. But this is a huge move.
He was a preacher. And he did a lot of praying on it. And what they said, and
it worked out
right.
for him.
Yeah, it was, and it didn't work out for the Vikings when they did that. Let's get one player to get us over the hump, and Herschel Walker didn't quite work out.
So, I'll do my 3 ways to win.
For more points? Just kidding.
Yeah, throw the ball and catch it. That's one of them. Turnover battle, obviously. We've talked about this. I really believe that that's what it's going to come down to. The Vikings overcame the turnover deficit against the Lions, and that killed them clearly against the Saints. That's something that hopefully with the bye, maybe with the offensive line having a little bit time to get healthy, to gel, since this is like the 5th combination of offensive linemen we've already had this season. That'll help. I really think that's what it's going to come down to, and I just have these visions of Cousins getting strip sacked, and I just really hope it doesn't come down to that. It seems like this team hasn't played well as a unit yet. The offense was on fire, but the defense was struggling. The defense is on fire, but the offense hasn't been the same, turning the ball over. And so I'm really hoping they were able to take advantage of this bye and figure that out, because that's gonna, at the end of the day, this is all for naught if they can't clean that up before the playoffs.
That's true. Yep. Yeah, I mean, the playoff run starts now. You got to have you playing your best ball in November, December. That's a cliche, but it's true. The Vikings are in. If we don't look at this game with such fear and trepidation, they are primed to make a run.
Yeah.
you had talked about it with the Central Division collision here these 3 weeks in a row. You win these 3 games, and you are setting yourself up for the remainder of the season and putting yourself in position. So, I like I said before, I don't fear the Packers as much as I have in the past. There's just not enough there around Aaron Rodgers. We saw last night that game was handed to them early on, and they still couldn't.
They have got to be pissed at. I watched a lot of it, and then I listened to some of it on the radio, at least the reaction to it, and the fans have to be just done with Mike McCarthy at this point. I know they were mad about the 4th and 2 that he didn't go for. Yeah, Rodgers made some beautiful throws. He's a very talented guy, but yeah, that team, yeah, I don't fear them either.
In the late going, he made a couple bad throws.
Did he?
My goodness. I mean, they were like, either they came out of his hand bad or something, and he threw one at the feet of a, I think at the 3rd and 2, they threw that behind his receiver at his back of his feet. And going, what?
Wow.
I haven't seen him do that in his entire career. And I don't know if it got blocked or nothing, but they didn't show that. But I was surprised as heck. He was.
They
should have won that game.
I think he's frustrated, and I think he should be. We've talked about that, but nothing pleases me more, to be completely honest. The other 2 are similar. And I talked about these as well, making the Bears offense one-dimensional, and the other one is continue to dominate on 3rd downs. And they're similar. Trubisky, I think, has really spread the ball around a lot. His 3 or 4 receivers with about 50 receptions apiece. The Bears have already scored more points this season, though, than they did all of last season, and so they are capable of putting up points, but if the Vikings can come in, average that 3rd and 9 and 25%, that gives you everything that you want. The time of possession should be in the Vikings' favor. Hopefully they'll have a few long drives, but I think that's really what it's going to come down to, making Trubisky beat you with his arms, limiting him in the run game, shutting down the running backs, and seeing if the young guy can air it out. And, I've been really quickly just very encouraged by some of the depth that we've seen in the secondary. I'm a big Curse fan right now. Having a guy that's 6'4" playing the slot seems unfair, and I think that's going to be a big part of it. I think Trey Waynes is having a great year that's kind of going unnoticed. And Xavier Rhodes will be back, and he'll be a lot more healthy than he was against the Lions. So I think it'll come down to that. I alluded to this earlier in the show. My confidence is growing compared to the doom and gloom from the other day. So I think that's what it's going to come down to.
I don't have a whole lot for making this assertion, but I don't feel like – I think the Bears are still a year away from a deep run in the playoffs. They could very easily be a playoff team this year because their strength of schedule the rest of the way is probably a lot easier than others who they'll be battling. You got 3 teams down in the AFC South that are knocking each other, crazy, and they'll knock somebody out of the playoffs. You could possibly, if both Vikings and Bears keep winning, you could get 2 NFC teams in there. It's very possible. But I think next year, they're going to be a team to be reckoned with, to be for sure, because Trubisky has got the skills, and he's not just one-dimensional, and he's starting to figure it out. I think Nagy is a heck of an offensive mind.
Yeah.
And the defense is solid, and I mean it's great. The defense is great. So this is a team that the Vikings, they're going to be battling them for the next few years. I think I'd probably be more confident saying this after a Vikings win on Sunday night, but it's just a gut feeling right now that this could be their game where they figure, okay, we're not quite there yet, but we know where we're going, and that means that the Bears lose, and I hope that's the case. Like I said the other night, 24-23 Vikings. It's going to be a gut punch game. They're going to have to go after each other, and that defense is going to. The defense doesn't have to worry about nerves. They just have to go out there and hit people. But Trubisky and the offense, there's a little bit of pressure on them. So,
it's a big stage, and I completely agree with you that they're kind of a year ahead of schedule. And And
next season have that schedule. If they make the playoffs, and it'll be tougher for them. But this year, the Vikings got to stay ahead of them this year because the Vikings went to the NFC Championship last year, and they shouldn't. It's too soon for them to relinquish their that lofty.
This is a spicy take to put at the very end of the show, but I feel like if the Vikings had kept Case Keenum, they would have fallen apart this season. With all the injuries that they've had and the hangover from the NFC Championship being historically the next season for the Vikings has always been a disaster. I think they've mitigated those waters relatively well considering, especially with the teams that they've had to play. Granted, they've lost to those good teams, but they played well against them. I think the hope is that they'll get it all together,
Yep, I would agree with that. They would have struggled this year because the offense would not. You didn't have Cook. You didn't. The offense. Adam Thielen and Diggs wouldn't be having the season they're having. I don't think.
No.
Because with Cook out, the pressures on the passing game and Cousins. I mean, Cousins has played great. I don't care what anybody says about it. You can talk to me until you're blue in the face about the turnovers. Yep, that's a big deal. But everything else he's done has been great for this team.
Yeah. And nobody's perfect.
Yeah, that's right. So no, I just keep winning, get yourself in the playoffs, get in that little tournament at the end of the year, and then you start seeing the teams that can game plan better and game plan for a specific team. Then we'll see who's what. But I like the Vikings' chances with the Saints, the Rams, the Eagles, and I will especially like them if they win on Sunday night. Huge game, Joe. Huge.
Oh, man. If they win, I will be elated. I did pick them to lose 21-18 or 16, I believe. I want to be wrong. I am starting to feel like maybe I will be. It's going to be a huge game, and I cannot wait. I do want to announce really quickly before we go that we are revamping the About the Labor podcast, which is the largest podcast that is on the Vikings territory Purple PTSD network. It was actually an independent podcast, but I ended up purchasing it, and we are going to have a really cool lineup of guys that are going to do a lot of deep dive post-game breakdowns in regards to X's and O's, analytics, that sort of thing. I believe, don't quote me on this, but it should be Sean Borman, Nick Olson, and Luke Braun as the trio on that show. Drew is the former owner. He still will appear on the show periodically, once or twice a month, and he also will continue to write for Vikings Territory. But we're bringing About the Labor to the Purple Territory Radio Network, which is going to be awesome for everybody. We also just partnered with the largest Spanish language Vikings podcast. And so if you... Isn't that awesome? They went to training camp and asked all their questions in Spanish. I don't know how the players knew what they were talking about, but they seemingly did. So we're making moves, and it's very exciting. And so I wanted to thank everybody for supporting us. Morning Joe's is our largest show, or at least it used to be before About the Labor joined.
Killing.
Super bitter about that. But we got an ace up our sleeve, and that ace is Grey Duck Vodka and Mr. Chad Greenway. So definitely check out the show on Tuesday. I'll be submitting a couple things on social media and on Reddit, soliciting, questions that you guys as listeners and fans might want us to ask him about his time with the Vikings, what he's up to now, so on and so forth. My first and only question is, why are Big Ten players better at everything? But yeah, follow us.
That was talking for the entire allotment of the show. You guys can go back and forth. You don't even need it.
Follow us on social media at Purple PTSD, at Viking Territory. But we will definitely be back on Tuesday. We'll be live chatting the game Sunday night. That should be a lot of fun. We'll be doing the pregame show, and the new About the Labor show will be doing the postgame. So thanks again for all your support. It means a lot to us, and we're very excited to be able to do this for you guys. So, this has been Morning Joe's. Catch you next week. Skol.